I am the worst rester in the world. It's like I grew up with a mindset of rest is what weak people do. It's like I'm a high achieving type person. Like I said, I've been working since I literally was allowed to work. And I didn't just like get the quick job. I was the person who was like networking and campaigning from the moment I knew that was a thing you could do. And so my personality is extremely driven. And so rest is not something I enjoy. It's not something that I enjoy doing to this day. It's not something I enjoy doing. I'm the one person who's, if you have asked, what's the one thing that you never want to ever have to talk about? It would have been rest because I'm like, who wants to do that? My mother died in childbirth. So I never was one who even really trusted that God was good.
Ah,
And I didn't trust God, if we're going to be very frank with it,
sure.
growing up.
Yeah.
And so I didn't trust him and I didn't trust that he was good because that wasn't the experience that I felt like I had as a child growing up, raised by a 77-year-old grandmother, not having a mom or dad in the picture at the time. So it was one of those situations where rest to me was like not an option because I felt like anything I wanted in life, I was going to have to work for.
Yeah.
And so I feel like a lot of us, we rest at the level of our trust. And so because there's a place where trust has been severed, maybe it's like me, trust was severed with you and God long before you even knew who he was from birth, really. Trust got severed. And when there's anything that starts to kind of sever that trust, it is hard to rest when you feel like the person who would uphold it is not trustworthy. So you're always wanting to have your hands on it. Even though we know none of us have control over anything, if you feel like you can't trust situations or people, you try to have some level of control because it feels safer that way.
Mhm.
And so if sometimes when rest feels unsafe, it's because there's some part of you that doesn't trust that life can still go on if you're not holding the reins as you feel you might need to hold them to
Mhm.
keep things kind of stable.
Hey, friends, welcome to the Holy Shift Show. I'm your host, Christine Crawford, and I'm so glad you're here. This podcast is for anyone willing to be curious, dig deep, and be surprised by God. Well, welcome back to our Draw Near, Dwell Well series, where we're overcoming overwhelm and learning to live healed and whole. To do that, we're exploring some soul care and spiritual formation practices that help us connect deeply with God, ourselves, and others. We're a few episodes into the series now, so if this is your first time joining us, I hope that you'll go back and listen to episodes 1 and 2 first. Episode 1 is just kind of an introduction, but it is where I provide some more context as to why I chose this topic and why I think it's such a holy shift for so many of us. It's also where I share more about how I've been muddling through a prolonged season of grief and trying to heal from a painful marriage and an unwanted divorce. And then episode 2 is really important. That's where I define a lot of the terms we're going to be using and break down the theology behind drawing near and dwelling well. It's also where I help us understand how the life of faith is not about knowing more about God or doing more for God. It's not even about meeting some long list of expectations we think comes from God. It's about accepting the one big, beautiful invitation to draw near to and dwell well with God. And one of the soul care and spiritual formation practices that help us do that is rest. Now, rest is all throughout the Bible, often referred to as Sabbath. And the original Hebrew Sabbath means to stop or to cease. So theoretically, Sabbath rest is when we cease from work, worry, striving, buying, and social media. But some of us live like we're anti-rest. We live like we have border collies in our brains or crack-headed hamsters on the wheels in our minds. And we insist that we don't have the time, the ability, or maybe even the inclination to rest. And unless we're learning to practice simplicity, like we talked about in the last episode, we're probably right. There are some other reasons we tend not to rest. The first one is that some of us are in life stages that make rest really hard. But I just want to encourage us that even if we're in one of those life stages, there are still small choices we can make to get more rest. The second reason we tend not to rest is some of us think rest is laziness. We equate it with weakness. But God rested, and he is neither lazy nor weak, so we know that can't be right. And the third reason a lot of us don't rest is because we don't think we have permission. I think this is specifically true for those of us who have maybe accidentally embraced the lie that we've been called to the ministry of burnout. That includes me, and I did a podcast on this last January called Rest as a Resolution. That was when I was first really realizing my own resistance to rest. Now, I went back and I listened to that episode before I recorded this one, and bless my heart. I had the best of intentions, but also I was kind of clueless as to what I was up against. But hopefully, some of it is still helpful. I know my guest, Emily Lewis, was awesome, and I learned so much from her. She also introduced me to our guest today, who is like the expert on rest, and we'll get to her in just a minute. But something that I uncovered in my time with Emily is that I didn't rest because I didn't think I had permission to do so. If that resonates, if you feel like you don't have permission to rest, if you feel like you don't have the tools to rest, I hope that this episode will serve as your permission slip and your action plan, and as a reminder to all of us that God has invited us and commanded us to rest. Because some of us are rationalizing our busyness and we're calling it ministry or holy. This is even going on within the church. Another episode where we touched on this was the one with Ian Simpkins. It was episode 18, I believe. And in it, we were talking about how hustle culture has permeated the church. In that episode, he said this: "There's a lot of cheerleaders on the road to 80-hour weeks. Alcoholics get treatment. Workaholics get applause." Now, I'll add to that. Boss babes close the deal and super moms wear the capes. And somehow, even in the church, we've perpetuated the idolatry of productivity and we've called it ministry. Ian also said that rest feels like stress if busy is our coping mechanism. Adding to that again, rest feels like failure if success has become our identity. The truth is, our hustle isn't always holy, but we sure treat it like it is. Busyness is the world's and the church's most celebrated sin. But manic panic and frenetic fixation, those are not his pace for his dwelling place. And as stewards of our loves and lives, we must choose to space and pace them according to God's teaching and for his glory. Speaking of tempo, we're going to unpack slowing down and sitting still in the next episode. But today, we get to learn from an expert about how we might have misunderstood the purpose of rest and how we can actually practice it. And to help us do that, I have Dr. Saundra Dalton Smith joining us. Dr. Saundra is a board-certified internal medicine physician, speaker, and an award-winning author. She is an international well-being thought leader and the author of numerous books, including her bestseller, Sacred Rest: Recover Your Life, Renew Your Energy, Restore Your Sanity. In that book, she breaks down the theology of rest and offers insight to the 7 types of rest needed to optimize our productivity, increase our overall happiness, overcome burnout, and live our best life. And as a busy physician, author, and mom, Dr. Saundra understands that life's demands can leave us feeling mentally overwhelmed, emotionally drained, and physically exhausted. So she helps those of us who feel overstressed deal with our work-rest balance and find actionable answers to the thriving lifestyle we desire. I don't know about you, but I could stand to learn a lot more about rest, and I'm really excited for this episode. So listen in as we discuss drawing near and dwelling well, and join us as we explore the upside-down kingdom of God as the right way forward in faith and life. Well, Dr. Saundra, I am so thrilled that you are with us today. I'm starting this new series on Draw Near and Dwell Well, and I am excited about every segment that we're doing as part of it. But I am particularly excited about this one because I have particularly suffered in this area. And I'm so excited to get to learn from you firsthand. I was first introduced to your work by another guest I had last January, Emily Lewis. She introduced me to your work and to Sacred Rest. And I devoured that. I just got done rereading it, and it was even more helpful the second time. I think I'm just in a better place to absorb it. And I'm so excited to have you on. I want to learn from you, but I also know that this whole epidemic of burnout and exhaustion, especially for women, it really is an epidemic. It's not just me. Pretty much everybody I know is exhausted and I think kind of misunderstanding the concept of rest. And you're here to teach us and to guide us and to clarify some things. So thank you so much for being here and being willing to chat with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, well, I'd love for you just to start, if you would, just with your story, kind of what drew you to this work and what you're hoping that your voice will accomplish in this world.
Yeah, well, I was drawn to the work very organically. I burned out. So, in the process of burning out, I did not want to quit my job. I love the work that I do. And so, I wanted to figure out, how do you stay in a tough profession in a high pressure type environment and have it be sustainable. Actually, not get to a place where you have to stop or quit or give up or change or whatever it is. For me, my background's in biochemistry. I'm a physician by practice, but my background's in biochemistry. So I have a tendency to always approach problems kind of with that type of mindset. I've been doing research since I was 16, like literally in a lab at 16 and at college working. And so I've always thought if I can break things down to the smallest like element of them, then I can have a deeper understanding of what the real problem is. And so for me, the problem was exhaustion. And so the smallest element of that was fatigue. It's like, what kind of fatigue do I have? Because at first I was like everybody else. Fatigue is fatigue. There's just one type. You're tired. You go get rest and you get better. But I think all of us have witnessed that just getting rest, whatever you think that may be, you can sleep for 8 hours and wake up still exhausted. You can go on vacation, break away from everything that stresses you and still be exhausted. That there's a finer unit to it that has to be recognized and be very intentional about getting restoration in to actually see the result that we're wanting.
Oh, I love
That's
that.
what I'm hoping my voice accomplishes.
Well, and it's such a unique voice because you have like street cred. You've lived this. So you know what it is to be tired. You're not talking at us. You are talking with us. You know about this. You're a scientist. You're a physician. So you know the science of it. And then you also have a faith and understand the concept of like divine design and how we're purposed to live in this world. You're just like the unicorn of rest and wisdom. So I love the way you broke that down. And having read your book, and I'm going to have you kind of break it down for everybody here who hasn't gotten to do that yet, but having read your book and going off of what you just said, what you found out is like some of us think that rest is sleep or rest is a quick vacation. And of course, we're finding that that's not enough, that isn't real rest. So there are actually different types of rest. I'm going to have you get into that in a minute. But before we get into kind of the minutia, I wanted to ask you, how do you think, so, the concept of the show and the ministry is the holy shift, ways we might be misunderstanding God or getting our faith practices upside down. What would you say the big holy shift might be or need to be about rest? How can we better understand rest so that we can draw near and dwell well?
Yeah, I think that's why I named the book Sacred Rest is that exact reason. I think we have to shift from rest being this thing we do when the work is done, like it's this second class citizen to work. And it's like, oh, well, when the work's done, then I'll do rest. Well, the work's never done. That's why most of us aren't resting because that's the mindset we have. And so we have like really fantastic work ethics and we have zero rest ethic. And rest was something that was important enough to the creator that from the very creation story, he kind of enveloped it into the creative story. But I feel like the shift that we even have to make there is that the thought process is on the seventh day, after God did all the work, he rested. But we have to not look at God necessarily in that image and look at where was man in that timeline. Because man wasn't there on day one. Mankind was created on day 6 and not even at the beginning of the day after animals. So our first full day wasn't day 6. Our first full day on the earth was actually day 7, which is the day of rest. And so our first full day of being, we were not doing. We started from rest.
Well, that's
and from there, the work began.
Yeah.
And I think that was the spiritual mindset shift that changed everything for me.
Oh my gosh. It really is a holy shift because I have always thought of like, rest is the reward. You do the hard work. And I've always thought of it as day 7. It's the end. It's, the carrot at the end of the stick, like to get me going through everything. And you're saying like this was the beginning of mankind. And even the ways that Sabbath is practiced, oftentimes it's not the end of the week, it's the beginning.
Exactly.
Oh, so I've never really put that together. That's
the shift.
That's a shift. That is a shift. That's amazing. Okay. And then in terms of design to draw near and dwell well, it sounds like what you're saying, and feel free to correct me on my belief here, but we were designed for this. This is part of the divine design and the creator knows us best, knows what we need the best. I think sometimes we think of rest as weakness. And
Mhm.
it can be really confusing because then we see God resting and God isn't weak. And yet we think we're weak if we need rest. And that's a big holy shift for me is like, no, rest can be obedience.
Yeah, the rest is a feeling. It's not a weakness at all. It's actually the place where you go to get stored back up. It's where you go to get poured back into,
Mhm.
to really get equipped for the work that you're being set out to do. I feel like oftentimes we're working from our own emptiness, and that's how a lot of us have become accustomed to. We work from our exhaustion. We're used to working from empty, but we don't actually really know what it feels like to work like the biblical creative story, to work after being filled up in that time of rest and restoration. Because that's really what rest is about. It's about restoration, being having all of your buckets filled back up so that as you go out into the world to pour out, you're not pouring from your depletion. You're pouring from
Yeah.
your fullness. I feel like that is kind of where we have to get our thinking around rest.
That's so good. And I literally like probably 70% of your book highlighted, and I was reviewing some of the ones I had like put 97 stars next to and, bookmark the page and everything else. Right on the front of that page I was reviewing before we got on, you say rest is not merely taking a break. Rest is about replenishing, restoring, renewing, recovering, rebuilding, regenerating, remolding, and repairing. Rest begins with the prefix re because it requires us to go back to a prior state. It is a second chance. It is an opportunity to put back in order anything that has shifted out of alignment with God's best. I mean, we could stop now,
Mhm.
except for that I wanna dig a little deeper. That's so good. So would you then, now having kind of better defined rest for us, could you talk about the different kinds of rest, the different types that there are?
Yeah. So, in my own journey with burnout, I initially thought, okay, I must just be tired. So, so I focused initially on sleep, and I was quickly realizing that that wasn't it. That's kind of where the seven types of rest came from that I talk about in the book Sacred Rest. Is that there's physical, obviously, but there are other ways that we deplete. So the seven include the physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, social, sensory, and creative types of rest.
Mhm.
And so those seven areas each has their own like specific symptoms you can have. I'm in medical, so everything has symptoms. So specific symptoms you can have if you're not getting rest or enough restoration in those areas. And they also have specific like activities, things that you can do that help pour back into them. The separation of that for myself was what helped me in my own burnout recovery, because then it required me to first identify what type of tired I am,
Okay.
and not just keep saying, "I'm so tired, I'm burned out, I'm exhausted," because
Yeah.
that's what I was doing. And it's like I wasn't actually being specific enough to actually help the problem. I was just recanting that there was a problem. But once I got more specific and started asking myself the question, okay, what's tired? Why am I exhausted? What did I do today that exhausted me? And evaluating where am I expending energy and putting myself out there, then I could be intentional about what were the things that actually helped that particular part of myself feel restored and stronger.
Yeah, that's so good, and I love that you provide a quiz for this to help us kinda discern, because as a physician, like, if someone comes in and they say, "Well, I'm feeling this kind of way," if you don't narrow it down and get specific, then you don't know what to throw at it for treatment, right? Just
Exactly.
from,
Yeah.
like, a physical, and rest is the same way. So, there's a very big difference between the need for physical rest, which is, hey, our body is tired because, we lifted a bunch of heavy stuff and we kinda need to give our bodies a break, all the way to, like, emotional and mental and social rest. So I took your quiz, and I wasn't surprised by, the places
Hmm.
that I was the most burned out, but it was very clarifying to really see it on paper. I was able to see ways where the kind of exhaustion and fatigue, the emotional and social fatigue, especially that I was experiencing, I was trying to treat it physically. I know that, like, there's a bunch of women out there, they have thriving careers, or they've got relational stuff that they're working through. Maybe they've got kids to raise, maybe they've got a hard situation in their family. There are things that are taxing them, in pretty much every category. And if we don't understand rest kind of more holistically, then we can't treat it more holistically. And I feel like that's what your research is going to give us the ability to do is just really have a better understanding of the particular types of rest. So for instance, the social and emotional rest, I have a theory. I'm not floated this. I'm making this up as I go. But I rank at about 98% introvert, but I wasn't that way as a child at all. And so I'm starting to think, is there something like called like trauma informed introversion, where it isn't so much that I'm an introvert, it's that most of the relationships I've had have been unsafe and they have been so depleting for me that I have begun to isolate and need more and more recovery time because the people I'm around are not necessarily safe. And, it's not this healthy, like reciprocated thing. And so I'm like, "Oh," and then I read the stuff about emotional rest and social rest and mental rest, and I'm like, that's what it is. That's part of it." If you're hearing like, "Well, I'm tired, but I'm a different kind of tired," I promise you, Dr. Saundra is going to help you deal with the kind of tired that you are, and it may not be what you think. And I'm gonna link your rest quiz up in the show notes because I want people to go take this and to actually be able to dig down deep. So the ones that I feel like most of my community, and I've got a beautifully diverse community. I think most of them are dealing with mental, social, and emotional, and those kind of all, there's some crossover, a little bit of crossover there.
Mhm.
And then, of course, the world that we live in now, I think we're dealing with what's the one where there's just constant input all the time?
Sensory.
The sensory rest. Yeah, thank you. I lost the word for a second. I think our whole world is dealing with some sensory overload. So the need for sensory rest, start with that one. Give us just a couple of quick tips for that. I think we kind of know the basics for that, but I'm sure you can give us some more helpful stuff. And then let's talk about that more relational factor because that's what I'm hearing from my community. Those are the places they're the most exhausted.
I would probably say sensory and creative rest are the 2 that most people are like, not only are they not evaluating that for themselves, but
Mhm.
it's not a thought that's ever even entered their brain to even consider as a place to get rest. So with sensory, you're basically looking at what are the sensory inputs and where you do life. What are the lights, sounds, smells? Are kids in the background talking and playing when you're working from home or phones going off in your office space? Are you hearing construction down the street? All of that sensory input, a lot of us feel like we're just tuning it out, but we don't realize to tune it out. Our body, our brain specifically has to be filtering it. You
Mhm.
don't just tune it out. There's work happening and that work is exhausting to some part of you. And so whether it's the work of filtering through the lights of being on your computer all day if you work in tech or the filtering through of the background noise of the kids while you're working from home, your senses are being overwhelmed. And so a lot of us, that sensory overwhelm shows up in a form of a change in our personality and how we engage behaviorally with people. The number one ways are irritation, agitation, rage, or anger.
Mhm.
And so if you start noticing I'm really irritable at the end of the day and I don't know why, then that could be a part of it. And so some of the things to just downgrade some of the sensory input, a big one for a lot of people is just turning off the notifications on your phone for everything that is not mandatory. Your job requires you to have something on for notifications, so be it. It is what it is. But do you need to have social media, all the weather apps, all the news apps? Keep all those apps on your phone but don't have the notifications turned on.
Yeah.
Choose when you want to go into that particular app and check out whatever it is and take back control of how these apps are kind of pushing out these burst of like energy that you have to keep using sensory wise with all of the buzzing and the humming that comes
Yeah.
from those notifications. So that's a simple one. Another one, just silence is something that we don't spend a lot of time in. We see scripturally there's a lot of talk about silence, but most of us can't name a time that we did silence other than maybe going to sleep. And so learning to reappreciate the value of silence just to reset our senses so that we have a moment of sensory deprivation which helps with that sensory overload symptoms. So anything from if you're working in a noisy place, having noise cancellation earphones
Yeah.
that you pop on for 15 minutes in the middle of the day just to have a silence reset
Yeah.
or driving home with everything off, no radio or anything in the background, just everything off, just to have a moment of a sensory reset, closing your eyes after your last Zoom meeting before you go into your next one taking a 2-minute sensory deprivation break just to close your eyes and just sit there with the computer waiting for your next Zoom moment of sensory deprivation. It's amazing how the cortisol levels and how our body responds to the reset, but it's so helpful to get that moment of sensory reprieve so that you don't stay agitated.
Oh, that's so good. And I think sometimes, like anybody who's listening that's afraid we're going to make you like take away all technology and you have to change everything about your life today. No, you're offering these little nuggets of respite that we can get in our day, in our lives that are so helpful. And we're going to talk about the spiritual practices of silence and solitude later. And I'm going to share the story of like my freak out on that. Part of what the problem is, like, we get so conditioned that that noise is going all the time that when it does get really silent, there's like almost a panic.
Hmm.
Like, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? And they talk about the attention spans of the kids these days. And now there's like some stat that says we have attention spans like of goldfish, and part of it is just because everything's changing so fast, so fast, so fast, and the stimulation is constant. And so if you're hearing Dr. Saundra talk about we need less stimulation and you're panicking and you're thinking, what am I going to do? You're not alone. And you don't have to turn everything off all day. That's not what we're asking. We're just saying it benefits your body, it benefits your soul. If you can find ways to build that in and then build that up, that can be so rejuvenating for everybody. Is that a good summary of?
Yeah, and
Okay.
especially, and that's the thing, especially if sensory rest deficit is the one you're struggling with. You
Yeah.
mentioned restquiz.com, if someone takes the quiz and they are excelling in sensory rest, that's that score for them is super low. Keep doing what you're doing. It's apparently
Yeah.
working. But if you're someone you're like, why is that score high? Then yeah, there's a lot of simple things. And I love what you shared because during my time of kind of evaluating some of the different strategies, I did a sensory deprivation tank. I've now done it multiple times, but the very first time that I did it, if you've never experienced this before, you're basically in a weightless, soundless, dark tank where it's complete silence, complete darkness. And I've never been one who's anxious or have a panic attack or anything like that. It was a come apart moment because
Yeah.
I'd never felt so like outside of myself. It was so foreign to me to
Yeah.
have that level of silence and darkness. If someone is like, I don't like silence, it makes me like feel bad. I get it. Yeah. I don't recommend necessarily jumping headlong into that either.
Yeah.
It was not a good experience. You take baby steps. You start
Mhm.
with the things like the moments of eyes closed deprivation or the silence moments. Start small and then expand from there for what feels right for you. Rest is
Yeah.
not something we should be judging each other on. It
Right.
should be something we should be experiencing for ourselves and then determining what works for us.
That's a really great point because I know when I first started practicing and I couldn't do what I hoped to do, and there was a friend who was going to practice it with me, and she totally panicked, like going in, she's like, I can't do it. I can't do it. To think that we could have started and with smaller steps. And also, like, sometimes I can't do full silence. So I will put on like restive music,
Mhm.
like I have a playlist called Soothe. And at least that's not crazy noise, and that gives my brain a little something to do.
Mhm.
I have, like, border collie brain, like, it has to have a job at all times. It has to have something to do. So I give it just a little something, but everything else kinda shuts down. So thank you for clarifying that, and yes, you're right. When they take your quiz, they'll be able to see, like, "Okay, this is where I'm really, really struggling." So, because I'm guessing, and I'll be interested, I'll have to poll my community later to see if once they take the quiz, if they landed where I'm thinking they're landing based on our conversations. The emotional, the mental, and the social rest. This is where I think a lot of my ladies are over inundated. Can you talk a little bit about what those can look like?
Yeah, mental has consistently been probably one of the higher scored areas. Usually it rotates between mental and emotional. So,
Mhm.
in general, men and women, that tends to be the higher areas. Mental rest is looking, and both, let me just say, mental and emotional both deal with the brain as well as does
Mhm.
sensory, because a lot of our stress responses rotate through our nervous system. And so, the mental type of rest is looking at the energy and the lack of energy we have in the areas of concentration, focus, and memory. And so that's the part of the brain that I'm focusing on.
Okay.
The emotional type of rest is focusing more on the relational feelings types of the brain, that aspect of how we use our brain. And so with the mental part of rest, if you're someone who has a mental rest deficit, this would be the person who says, I have a hard time remembering things, or I try to turn my brain off at night and it just keeps going. I
Yeah.
keep thinking all the thoughts and I can't get it to shut up and quiet down. So that's kind of the mental rest deficit type of it. The emotional rest deficit person is the person who sometimes is a people pleaser. It's like they cover up their feelings a lot because they don't want to have to deal with what they really feel. Sometimes it's the person who's highly professional and they've learned how to do customer service so well, they can keep the smile on their face even when they're wanting to cry inside. And so it's that type of stressors because sometimes we don't consider those things to be energy draining or stressors in any type of way, but they are. It takes a lot of energy to have a smile on your face when you're depressed. It takes a lot of energy to be a people pleaser because you're constantly keeping your own desires and emotions kind of in check to please or satisfy someone else. And so those levels of emotions that we use in the different areas have a big part of that.
Yeah, that's so true. And for the people pleasing, which is a big part of my story, there's a lot of hypervigilance involved in that. So you're having to read everything to see if you're safe. And that's exhausting. And again, going back to what you talked about with the nervous system and cortisol, we think that's all just happening up here and that's exhausting enough. But it's happening to our entire bodies. It is affecting our body, it is affecting our soul, it is affecting the way we view everything. This is a really big deal. This is bigger than I'm just tired. And when I first did the episode last January, I thought I was just tired. I thought I had hit some sort of physical burnout. I did not know the depth of what I was facing, what I was dealing with. And it took everything becoming like manifesting itself like physically for me to go into full-fledged adrenal failure and fatigue and that kind of thing. For me to be like, oh, everything's breaking. Something's wrong. We need to actually pay attention to this. But I had a huge resistance to rest. I grew up thinking, and I couldn't really tell you where it came from in childhood, but definitely as a woman now, as a Christian now, and then with the dynamics that I was in, that I was not allowed to rest. That rest was failure, that rest was selfish, that rest was laziness. And so the idea that I not only have permission to rest from God, but I've actually been commanded to rest, that this is what it means to steward our soul. Ooh, that was my big holy shift. So can you talk to us about like what you hear, like some of the big resistance points to rest might be?
Yeah, that's I love that you bring that point up. I feel like that's probably the reason that this was the thing that got because I've written multiple books and
Mhm.
this was I think my third book and it's always shocking to me how he's used this book internationally at this point and affected so many hundreds of thousands of people's lives off of it, Christian and non-Christian at this
Mhm.
point, simply because I am the worst rester in the world. It's like I grew up with a mindset of rest is what weak people do. It's like I'm a high achieving type person. Like I said, I've been working since I literally was allowed to work. And I didn't just like get the quick job. I was the person who was like networking and campaigning from the moment I knew that was a thing you could do. And so my personality is extremely driven. And so rest is not something I enjoy. It's not something that I enjoy doing to this day. It's not something I enjoy doing. I'm the one person who, if you have asked, what's the one thing that you never want to ever have to talk about? It would have been rest because I'm like, who wants to do that? My mother died in childbirth. So I never was one who even really trusted that God was good.
Ah,
And I didn't trust God, if we're gonna be very frank with it at the
sure.
growing up.
Yeah.
And so I didn't trust him and I didn't trust that he was good because that wasn't the experience that I felt like I had as a child growing up raised by a 77-year-old grandmother, not having a mom or dad in the picture at the time. So it was one of those situations where rest to me was like not an option because I felt like anything I wanted in life I was gonna have to work for.
Yeah.
And so I feel like a lot of us, we rest at the level of our trust. And so because there's a place where trust has been severed, maybe it's like me, trust was severed with you and God long before you even knew who he was from birth, really. Trust
Mhm.
got severed. And when there's anything that starts to kind of sever that trust, it is hard to rest when you feel like the person who would uphold it is not trustworthy. So you're always wanting to have your hands on it. You all, even though we know none of us have control over anything, if you feel like you can't trust situations or people, you try to have some level of control because it feels safer that way.
Mhm.
And so if sometimes when rest feels unsafe, It's because there's some part of you that doesn't trust that life can still go on if you're not holding the reins as you feel you might need to hold them to
Mhm.
keep things kind of stable.
Hey friends, so sorry to interrupt this amazing conversation, and I do hope you're enjoying it, but I just wanted to remind you of some fun new resources and opportunities that we have for you at The Holy Shift. For one, I wanted to make it easier than ever to connect. I'm eager to hear from you and to see if and how any of this Draw Near, Dwell Well series resonates. I'd love to know how you're growing and where you're struggling. So I encourage you to reach out to me via our Instagram account, which is at The Holy Shift Ministry, or via our Connect page on the website. This show, after all, is for you, so I want to hear from you. And because what I have been working on has meant so much to me, I've been sharing it with others in more private settings for a while now. That has allowed me to connect more intimately with you guys, and that's what I really love to do. See, I believe that we both grow and heal in community, and it has been incredibly rewarding to witness the relief, joy, and peace drawing near and dwelling well brings. So now I'm offering some of these resources and opportunities publicly, and you can find them under the new resources tab on the website. Now you'll notice several drop-down options there, including a Draw Near Dwell Well page where you can access a free workbook that you can download for the series. I've put some scripture, quotes, and art in there that might be helpful, as well as some journal prompts and Holy Shift type questions to explore. It's a totally free resource, as well as a rather robust resource list that I've made where you can learn more about each of these topics and practices that we're going to be exploring here on the show. And then I have an entire Draw Near, Dwell Well online course available to you. This is a pre-recorded class that you can access instantly with a link and a password so that you can work through all this material in a slower, more convenient, and applicable way. I also get a lot more personal there, but I will tell you, it's a lot less like a course and more like a conversation. I am far too weary to put on my fancy pants these days. So you're literally going to get me in my garden, on my porch, and in my studio, just sharing the raw and real of what I've been learning. I do have some snazzy slides, an enhanced workbook, and some fun new bonuses in that course as well. And I'm also going to be offering a handful of times where I work through this material in a live small group setting so that we can workshop it together and even do some Q&A. And I'm now offering what I'm calling shift sessions, which are just opportunities for us to chat one-on-one and determine if, how, and when you can begin to make a holy shift in your own life. So if you want to go deeper in your faith, but you're not sure where or how to start, or if you need some help muddling through a question you have or a challenging truth you've learned, I'm here for you. You'll receive personal encouragement and practical guidance, and I'll help you clarify any mistheologies and misunderstandings of God's heart and will for you. And then if you really want to go deep, consider doing some one-on-one spiritual mentoring with me. I'd be honored to walk with you in your spiritual journey and encourage you as you learn how to live healed and whole. And if you want to help others draw near and dwell well, would you consider contributing to The Holy Shift? It helps support this work and enables me to continue to encourage others through this ministry. I operate as a nonprofit in partnership with the Women's Nonprofit Alliance, so all donations are tax deductible, and you can do this under the Contribute tab on the website. Again, all of that is available at theholyshift.org or via the links in the show notes. Okay, now back to our conversation.
The other thing is I started wrapping my worth up in my work. So when I was working, I was worthy. I was worthy of good things happening. I was worthy of the vacation. I was worthy of the time off or the raise or whatever it was. And if I wasn't working, then I wasn't worthy of those things. So then rest was not just like, oh, I'm giving up control, but now I'm giving up my identity. Who wants to do that? Nobody's going to rest when you feel that way. So these were some of the mindset shifts that had to happen for me to even get into a place where I could receive the gift of rest. In the book, I talk about the 7 types of rest and the 12 gifts that come when we allow ourselves to rest. Because I think for a lot of us bad resters who don't necessarily, aren't on the cheerleading squad for the rest team, I think those are the issues that we're facing. We don't have a good relationship of trust that allows us to be able to rest, or we've wrapped our worth and our identity up in our work. So rest feels like even a greater threat.
Yeah, it's 100% true. We talked about that a little bit with Ian Simpkins on, I think it was episode 18, talking about how busy becomes a badge of honor and accomplishment. And this goes back to like my people pleasing stuff. We kind of think like I am only what I do. My value and my identity is only what I can do. So if I'm not doing, I am nothing. And if I stop, then everyone will stop loving me, valuing me, blah blah blah. That's a really dangerous place to be spiritually and definitely emotionally and physically as well. If it's an identity issue, then it's kind of an idolatry issue. And this is something that we're going to want to deal with. Are you an Enneagram 3? Are you into Enneagram? Have you taken that?
I think I am.
Yeah. You
Like, when it
sound like
first
one.
came out, I did the test or whatever, and I think but I don't really keep up with all that, so I think
Okay.
I am a 3.
Okay. All right. Some people are super into it, not so much. You sound like a 3, and I've got 2 of my besties are 3s, and I'm like, "Ooh, I'm gonna send them this now." Like, they're gonna be so excited to hear this. And for some of us, it's built in. We live in a culture that has turned a lot of us into little performing monkeys, and for people, it's a little bit of a soapbox that I'm sure I'll jump on and off throughout the entire series. But in some circles, we've also sold this idea for women that marriage and motherhood should be martyrdom and it should be unto death. And they mean it all the way, like in every facet, in every category. And so, this idea of like self care and soul care, again, is something that women think they are not permitted to do. And if they do it, they're selfish or they're weak or who are they if they are not their accomplishments? So, thank you for being so honest and vulnerable about those things, because I think that's where people are really gonna connect with your story and your wisdom.
That's the part, I think, of my story I didn't go deep into in the book Sacred Rest, and it's something that I find myself sharing more the more I think I feel safe, maybe the right word to
Yeah.
actually voice that. That's actually the topic around my book that's coming out in March of 2025,
Oh,
is
that's
that whole
great.
journey. I work with a lot of women within a mentoring program that I lead, and I find that that is what most women are struggling with, is that disconnect that they feel between just their natural personality and then this desire to rest, but the struggle to rest
Mhm.
at the same time. So, yeah, so that's where I'm diving into for the next book.
Oh my gosh, well, I can't wait for that. I'm gonna let us know when we can pre-order because I'm one on the list for that. Okay, well, one of the things that I'm trying to be just really honest with my community on is as I'm having people come on and I'm talking about drawing near and dwelling well, it's not because I've got this all figured out. I'm telling everybody I'm practicing at practicing these spiritual practices. Like, I'm new to all this. That's why I'm trying to bring the
Mhm.
experts on. And if you are gonna just like dumb it down kindergarten style for me, for some of the people who are listening, what would be just a couple of small next steps that we could take as we try to start this journey on having a better relationship with ourselves and with rest?
Yeah. Well, there's probably 2 main things I tell everybody to do. Number 1 is start with identifying the type of rest that you need.
Okay.
So, we've given you the 7. You can
Mhm.
take the quiz, you can just think about it. You can look at where you use energy in the day, and just think about where in these 7 areas do I feel like I am not being restored adequately in. So that's number 1.
Okay.
Identify the one that you want to begin with, because it's not you can't eat the whole elephant. You can't fix all 7 at one time.
Right.
So pick one, and then pick one intentional restorative practice that you're going to do to pour back into that area specifically. So if your area is emotional, as we mentioned, you're not going to pick getting a massage.
Mhm.
Yes, I know, massage, great self-care, but that's not rest for you in the area where you actually need restoration.
Right.
In that case, you may need to go out with a friend where you can just talk about what's on your heart.
Mhm.
You're not wanting them to fix it. Or it might even be you being real with your husband and not just being in the room with him every evening and calling it quality time, but actually having 5 minutes where you actually share with him what hurt your heart today. And
Mhm.
I think sometimes when we think about emotional rest, we kind of get it confused with trauma dumping. And
Mhm.
so if you're a woman who had a hard day at work and you come home, or a hard day with the kids if you're homeschooling, and your spouse comes home and you're like, Susie did this and Bobby did this and John did this, and you're telling all the details, right? Trauma dumping. You're trying to bring him into the moment as if he was there with you when it happened. And that's not beneficial. That doesn't help. It just recants and
Mhm.
recounts. What emotional rest would look like is saying, I felt really overwhelmed today. I didn't feel like I had control of the household.
Mhm.
I felt like I may not be the right mom to do homeschooling because I don't know. I don't feel like I have my stuff together right
Mhm.
now.
Mhm.
And this was just a really hard day. That's way harder to say to somebody because it's vulnerable, because it takes you off your pedestal. It humbles you. And that's what emotional rest looks like. It's like where I don't actually have to present well to you anymore. I can just be who I am and say it straight and know you're going to love me. And I don't need you to fix it. I just need to know you care enough to listen to me and maybe give me a hug and a kiss on the forehead afterwards. That's what most of us are needing. And that's what most of us are not getting because we will not lower ourselves enough to just be real.
Mm. Mm. Preach. Yes. So for those of us who are thinking emotional rest means stop feeling your emotions and interacting with people, no, that's not at all what it means. It can mean greater vulnerability, but in safe places and in healthy ways.
Absolutely. Whether that's journaling the emotions, it
Yes.
could be writing a poem. For some artists, their greatest music comes when they are emoting in their art.
Mhm.
So I don't know how your emotions need to authentically show up, but
Mhm.
that's what emotional rest is. It's the authentic release of the emotions you have.
Mhm. Mhm. Very good. Okay. Well, that's super helpful. And like I said, I'm going to link the quiz up and link the book up and basically make sure everyone can find you because they're all going to want to get to you and hear more about this and learn more about this. Is there any last thing you'd like to offer us before we end today?
My last thought would just simply be this is that rest is not like a second hand citizen to work. We really have to start viewing rest and not simply as cessation or stopping,
Okay.
but as the restoration, as activities that pour back into us so that we can start seeking out Sabbath. And Sabbath is no longer kind of like this sitting around on Sunday or whatever day of the week you choose, but Sabbath really is an opportunity for us to be filled back up, just like the seventh day was in creation.
Yeah, and to trust, because if we think about what Sabbath was, in the law and in the wilderness, it was an opportunity to trust God to provide.
Absolutely.
That
We
circles back
rest
to
at the level of our trust.
Yes, very convicting, very convicting. Thank you so much, Dr. Saundra. That was just amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for spending time with us today. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. I know that I'm really excited to go put into practice some of these rest practices we talked about today. If you want to know more about Dr. Saundra and her work, make sure and check out our show notes at theholyshift.org. And then while you're over there, there are a couple of things I would invite you to do. Number one, join our community. That's basically just signing up for our newsletter. But that's how you'll get access to bonus footage and find out more about events and community opportunities. It's also where you can offer feedback, ask questions, and join discussion groups. Then also don't forget to get your free Draw Near, Dwell Well workbook. It's under the resources tab, and that's where you can also check out some of the mentoring, small groups, and other opportunities I mentioned earlier. And then if you want to help other people make a holy shift or draw near and dwell well, I would love it if you would consider contributing to this ministry. That's what enables me to continue in this work. You can find more about that under the Contribute tab on the website. And then would you do me a favor? If you're liking the show, would you share it with a friend? Maybe this episode on rest or this whole series might be helpful or encouraging to somebody you know. And if you don't mind subscribing and leaving a review, that would be really helpful because it helps other people find us. And of course, we love that. I hope this podcast will continue to help us all shift our perspective on Jesus and learn how to live healthy and whole by drawing near and dwelling well. Thanks again for joining me as I explore the upside down kingdom of God as the right way forward in faith and life.